at William Street Gym with Rebellion promoter Sainaji. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, perfect.
Look at me, I'm educated. I don't know.
Multicultural.
I'm multicultural. So can you first, I'd like to just get a bit of a background on yourself, how you came into the world of Muay Thai.
Yeah. I came in probably a long way around. So like a lot of people in my early teens, I got into Taekwondo, which is really common at that stage. So I did Taekwondo from the age of 11 to 15. I think at about age 12, 13, I watched the World's Strongest Karate video, which was like the video of the first Kyokushin World Tournament. And they had all these other martial arts people go in it and get flogged except the Thais. So the Thais go in and they do really well, but then they get to the final and they pull out because they're used to fighting within weight. And then the finals against these like 110 kilo Japanese dudes. And I got really like fascinated by Muay Thai. I mean, like kickboxing and all that stuff was on, but I knew it was sort of bullshit. And then at that stage my mate and I started getting like VHS videos and stuff of Muay Thai.
What year was this?
Would have been 94, 93.
Yeah, right. Cool.
And then after I finished Taekwondo, like I didn't finish, I decided to finish. So I started sort of teaching myself Muay Thai. I'm like that with everything. I try to just Google stuff back then, find books. I started training with a guy called John Will, who'd brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Australia. And his system at the time was called shoot fighting. So it was Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling. So I did that for a couple of years, and the gym we did it at, Laos Tui was a Muay Thai trainer there. So I started training Muay Thai with him, and then I went and found a wrestling coach and stuff because I kind of wanted to get good at all this stuff. So I started training with Laos for a while, and then the wrestling kind of got a bit more of my interest. So I kind of stopped doing all striking, which is obsessive with, and I went and wrestled for 5-6 years, and then came back. I was bouncing at the time, so then I wanted to fight, started fighting like full contact karate and stuff, and then got back into training Muay Thai. And right before I was actually going to start fighting Muay Thai, I ended up opening my first gym, I was like 23, 24.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a PT studio.
Yep.
And then it just kind of rambled on, and then I just never really had a proper gym after that. That I had a trainer, but I just kind of had all these different people that came into my life that showed me bits. And from an early age, it just really appealed to me. But I'm not like, that's why I get guys calling me Mr. Muay Thai. I'm like, geez, I'm like the people who say that to me. I'm like, I'm a newbie. So, thank you, but yeah.
So when did you decide to take a leap into being a promoter?
So 2009. Our original, my second gym was down the road, Kaizen Fitness, and we went from being sort of personal training and boxing to boxing and kickboxing. What I thought I called kickboxing. I never felt quite comfortable calling it Muay Thai at that stage, which sort of in hindsight now, looking at what we were doing, was sort of pretty right on the track.
Yeah, a lot of people have been saying that. I talked to in New South Wales as well. They were saying it was more kickboxing.
Yeah,
early on.
Yeah, but I think what I was teaching was so much different to kickboxing because of all the stuff Laos had taught me. I remember from like 16 years old, like the stuff that guy, I still tell his fighters at my shows, I'm like, whatever he tells you, you'll remember in 30 years' time. He's got a charisma about him.
Yeah.
We were doing that, and then just one by one, my Thai trainers sort of just walked in through the door, who I still have as trainers sort of 9-10 years later.
Yeah, wow.
And we started going to shows and a lot more and putting fighters on, and all the shows were a bit mix and match. And I always tell people, I remember being at one show in Sydney with them where we fought Muay Thai, and then the main event was like a 12-round kickboxing fight or something. And who I consider sort of my head trainer for everything, Ton, he'd just come to Australia, and I think he knew K1, but he didn't even know what kickboxing was. And it took so long to explain to him what kickboxing was, because he's like, what? So not even kneeing. But I was just like, no, it's just punching and kicking, and there's no grappling and anything. and then we went to a Muay Thai show here, and it wasn't Muay Thai. And I was like, I remember seeing the three of them, Jojo, Jump, and Ton, the three Thai trainers standing there, and I don't know why I felt like I had to apologize to them, but I did. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to do a Muay Thai show. And I've been going to like Tariq Solak shows since I was 15, 16. So I was obsessive about K1 and what Muay Thai I knew and stuff. So I was like, I want to do a show, but I wanted to do, I guess, more like Roots now, my daytime show.
Oh, right, yeah.
I just wanted to do a scene where it was just regular Muay Thai shows, and then just did the first one, and it just kind of steamrolled out of control a bit.
Yeah. And when did you realise that the rebellion sort of got to at what it is now? When did you realise it had the potential to do that?
Honestly, like the first one, there so many like lucky things kind of happened. Some of it, obviously, I don't want to be fake humble. Some of it I went to a lot of detail to get right, but some stuff that ended up happening, kind of like it could have just not worked out that way.
Yeah, right.
And it got it, and then there was people that just went, "This is something really special." Like I had Joda McCauley and Carl Draper and Michael Vukovic telling me how to get my permit and doing this and that.
Right.
And then at that stage, people used to still fight a lot with shin guards here, and most of the fights were Muay Thai. And I just called up the board. I'm like, "Do you have to wear shin guards?" They're like, "No, we don't want you to wear shin guards." So I think mine was one of the first ones in a while that had no shin guard fights and just Muay Thai. And the first fight, Kane Brunton and Chris Cortez fought. Like the venue was beautiful. It was Red Scooter. It's not something you expect. People come in. It's like this beautiful reception center. Everything looks immaculate. They're just legends. They're just down the road. And they had this fight, and these like guy with no fights and a guy with one fight or something. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
And Paris, from Paris Productions, he was in the booth upstairs. He sprints down and he goes, "If that's your first fight, you got something special." And the fight nights go on, and then the main event ended up being Sam Medney and Kim Johnson.
Yep.
And that ended up being this ridiculous fight, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's the fight of the year." Blah, blah, blah. And I had people calling me the next day going, "Look, man, for your first shot, I was really good." And I was like, "Okay, maybe we're onto something." And it just went up from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you sort of find, I guess, really rewarding about being a promoter?
At the moment, and like to be honest, like my March show, I had Toby lined up to go out to fight, and I sat in the back room with Blair and Nugget, and I'm like, "I'm done with this. I'm kind of like, this is my last show." I was
wow.
It's ran its course. And then I had my other show booked, and I had like fights lined up, and like because I always wanted to get Yotkunpun on the show, that was like my weird man crush fight. So I did it, and then in the lead up, I had so many random people from like one of the Swiss guys, and even Yotkunpun, and then like one of the guys I'm going to try to get next year from America. They're going, "Oh, it's like on my bucket list to be on Rebellion." And I just went, and I've had that a lot, but I didn't think, but that was like, all right, come on, this is something special. You know, it's something special.
Pretty sure the whole of Australia would cry if you stopped doing Rebellion.
But yeah, it was like that, and I just went, that's honestly the most rewarding part, because, you know, like the shows we do, because like I try to get the whole card fairly decent.
Yeah.
It's not a huge sort of money spinner of a thing. Like everyone who promotes knows that.
Yeah.
So doesn't become rewarding like that. But when you get that from people going, and that was the intention, was to inspire people to get into Muay Thai, and I kind of feel like it does.
Yeah.
That for me is the most satisfying, when I get someone going, "Oh, this has fulfilled my bucket list to fight on Rebellion." I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool."
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. What are you sort of, with matching your fights, what do you really look for in a fighter that you want to have on your show?
I'd like, number one, I want him to have clean style, clean technique. Having said that, I want him to have clean technique but be a fighter, because you get guys who are really technical, but sometimes they're not in condition, sometimes they give up. So I kind of really want that mix. I get a lot of people go, "Oh, I've got this guy, he's a real banger, he's really exciting." I'm like, I don't want the guys who are just going to come and try to knock the guy out.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I just, I think Muay Thai's, you know, sort of in a way brutal enough as it is, without needing guys who are just going to put their head down and roll haymakers.
Yep.
So I get that a lot. I get guys like, "Oh, he'll put on a show." I'm like, and then I watch their video and they don't seem to have that. So I really like someone who's got a well-rounded style, or they're particularly like a really good clincher. Like when we used to have Corey, he was maybe not, you wouldn't call him a classical stylist, but he was just a savage in the clinch. And it was like, it becomes a chess match. But I want someone who's got Muay Thai style. That's number one.
Yeah, right. And what's some advice you could give to a fighter as a promoter that fighters need to sort of keep in mind when they are looking to get onto not just your show but any show?
Look, I think different shows treat you differently. I think some shows, being a ticket seller is a bigger priority, and that's fine too. So I think that's one side that you should make yourself, you know, as much as I hate people being like Instagram professional fighter when they've never actually they've never lived off their fighting. I think people doing that stuff's important. But for me, it's just like making sure you're number one. I think it's like in any industry is being reliable. So if you say you're going to fight, you're not double booking yourself. You're not doing silly things and getting injured. You're not missing weight. Those things are really important because at the end of the day, promoting is a pretty high stress job. So if you get screwed once, you kind of remember it.
Yeah.
But for me, if you want to get on Rebellion, make sure you've got good style and you're fit.
Yeah.
And you keep your word.
Yeah, right. Good one. And what about for trainers working with yourself as well? Is there sort of things that you look for in certain trainers as well as the fighter, or it's not really a big...
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, like anything, it's relationships. Hello. Sorry, Melina.
I wanted attention.
It's like anything, like going back to what we said, it's sort of that, you get fulfillment out of doing other stuff, and it's the relationships. And, if you find people who are like relatively easy to work with, that makes a huge difference. Like I always tell the story of like Blair Smith. The reason we've worked so many times isn't because Perth flights to Melbourne are cheap. It's because when I had a pull out and Roy Wills jumped in on a week's notice on Rebellion 2 and it became this massive fight. When I called him and I was like negotiating Perth, it was a negotiation. I went to offer him more money than I offered the guy that was being replaced. And he's like, nah, man, it's a long way away from there. We don't need that. We're just happy to get the fight. He came down. It's never been a stress. Like there's something, most of the people I work with, I can't actually complain about anyone. But most of the most amazing thing I've found with the Perth gyms, and I don't know if they're just desperate because they're over there, but I've never had to call up and there's been haggling or anything. Like Blair's just like, yep, no worries, bang.
Yeah.
Darren Kurovic's just like, I'm like, can you just, like, he doesn't even hassle me about fights. He doesn't, like, if I call him, he goes, yep, cool, yep, no problem. They'll confirm. Riddler, all those guys, they're just, there's no friction. And I think it comes from them, being in the industry for a long time, but also being promoters. They know what it's like.
Yeah.
And then you get some people, it's like, oh, can I have 7 cornermen and then I do this, can I do that? It's like, you know what, it's just
too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing I do find about WA as well is that they are always ready to go too. You can just call them at the drop of a hat and they are ready to go. And they just breed such tough fighters over there. It's
unreal. You go there, and I've kind of gone over to commentate a few times, and you sit there and you go, oh, that corner's like, Darren, and that corner's Darren Kurovic. And then the next fight, it's like, Preacher will be there, and someone. And it's just like, it's just legends in every corner.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. Like you go, oh, there's Eugene Ecclebloom's in one corner. Cool. It's like, no, one of these guys are so good. It's just so. And then there's like 20 ties from Sang Marakat there. It's just like, it's unreal.
That's cool. I think I've been.
I still love Queensland too.
Yeah, I was saying, I think Queensland. That's one thing I'd love to see is a WA versus Queensland, like just a full show of that.
Yeah, I've tried. There's been a few close ones.
Oh, really?
I've had a few like. Queensland WA matches. I think we had one show we had like 2 or 3 fights. It was Queensland versus WA, and like I had other promoters going, "Are either of these guys selling any tickets?" I'm like, "No, it's a good fight."
But I mean, nowadays that because you've got online sales too. Yeah. How does that go being a promoter with having online sales?
Look, it's not. It's nowhere near as lucrative. I think most people like. It's one thing Hammer says, and he's very right onto it. And he goes, if you look at the numbers of our sport, as much as we want it to be all these other stuff. End of the day, the viewership and stuff doesn't lie. So, we've done free live streams on Facebook and all that stuff, and the viewers aren't that much. And even with the pay-per-view, we don't get that much. Like I was telling you earlier, I do a professional jiu-jitsu event, and I think my highest pay-per-view on that was 3 times the highest Rebellion one I've ever done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's complete, and I think Muay Thai people are just used to watching stuff.
Yeah.
They'll get it on YouTube in 2 weeks or this and that.
And do you think maybe it plays a part in the fact that one person buys it and have like 20 people watching it at their house?
Yeah, if there was a way to stop that, it'd be great.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, it is. But then like for me, it's been really good because I've the last 2 years, Timo's been coming out. And from Muay Thais, and he puts our good fights on Muay Thais. And honestly, like our YouTube channel's building, but his presence, like, I honestly think a video on his YouTube channel probably gets more eyes on it than Fox Sports would.
Yeah, right.
And it'd be more dedicated Muay Thai people.
Yep. Yeah, true.
So there's a lot of that stuff, but I think as a sport, like what we're sort of trying to do, me and Tom with Rebellion, we want to make it more than just the promotion. We want to make the promotions as part of the whole thing of our YouTube content and our profiles and all that sort of stuff building out, so people have a reason to tune in. Because
For sure.
you think back 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was the Daddy Cools and Sorens and Wayne Parr regularly in Australia and stuff. We don't really have that now. We've got Toby, and then we've got other guys, but we don't have like
that star sort of quality.
Yeah. And even now, if people say, I go, Toby's on the next show, Muay Thai, people know who Toby is. A lot of people, I go, watch this video, and they're like, oh shit, that guy. Yeah.
What do you think that's sort of the reason for that?
I think obviously Evo was so good and so dominant, and he was on Foxtel, and then we had that sort of period where there was nothing on Foxtel, and now there's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of shows. Like Melbourne's probably we ended up having a few, and now we're sort of back down again. But I think like with Queensland, there seems to be a show every week, twice a week.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, which is sort of like, it just becomes a thing of numbers, and it's good because the sport probably needs that thicker base for the superstars to come out of it. But at the moment, it's that rebuilding, transitioning thing. And I think stuff that's happening with the various promotions getting a little bit bigger and smarter. You see all the content that people are putting out, like there's now regular promo videos, and the posters are getting like, that was the one thing I wanted to change when we came in, was all the posters used to just look like someone had cut them out and clagged them on, and now the posters look good, everything's looking polished, and I think that'll raise it. But yeah, I think it's just that dip the last few years. And end of the day, as much as we all want to say we want to be treated professionally, I think even the highest level guys, we're not really behaving professionally in every level. Like what you would consider a professional would get their blood working on time and this and that. And you know, how many trainers don't have their registration and stuff? It's like, it's not really a professional sport. We want to be, but we're not.
Yeah. And what do you think the same sort of, you know, like there's a lot of money in boxing with sponsorship and that kind of thing. What do you think we need to change in our industry to be able to get more sponsors on board and support the industry?
I don't know. Like, I think the general level of it has to be better, the level of professionalism around it, because at the end of the day, like, it means nothing to be an Australian champion. It literally means nothing. Like, you can say, here's probably 40 guys who are Australian champions who haven't even defended their titles. Like, our sport, we know how real it is, but the credibility side of it's low. Like, we can't point to a champion in our sport. We just can't. Like, I'm biased, but I think, like, if you got a WMC Australian title, that's a pretty good thing. And I think the WBC champion's pretty high up. And some of the other titles, it's been contested by good guys. But there's so many titles and so many levels, and every show you go to, there's that many fights happening. That's just like, why would a sponsor get behind it? And you know, if you go to a sponsor and they say, okay, how many people come to your show? Okay, 1,200 people. 1,200 people is nothing. They can put a billboard on the side of the road and get more for that. So how are we gonna change that? That's the challenge for all of us. But we've got a big viewership that's split open right now over maybe 70 shows in Australia. So, you know, UFC is UFC. There's other people trying, but there's UFC.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, true. That's interesting, because that's one thing that is, you know, you're trying to think that you get that complaint from everybody because, you know, with promoters putting shows on and trying to get fights matched, but, you know, the promoters can't afford to fly people in or pay big purses, and the fighters want to get paid bigger purses, but they want to get paid bigger purses when they haven't had that many fights, and that kind of, there's that kind of struggle going on, you know, and I try to sort of let people know, well, there's no sponsorship support either. You've got to have that, so otherwise you've got to then try and sell as many tickets as you can. I
think the sponsorship that we do get is amazing. Like, for what they get, like JPS, the number of years they've been behind my show, and like Quest and stuff they've been behind, it's purely a love thing.
That's
it's purely
it. Yeah,
them being,
that's right.
Like, I can't honestly, like, if they ever have to pull back or miss a show or anything, like, you can't. There's no doubt. It's like, we're not giving you anything back.
Yeah, 100%,
you're getting some ringside seats, and we do the best we can, but there's no direct benefit to them. But that's the hardest thing. Like, there's a fighter that I really want to get on Rebellion, and like I'll try. Like, I bit the bullet and I made him a stupid offer in March to bring him out to fight Toby this year. And the offer that I made that was so far beyond anything that was realistically reasonable, he wanted double that.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, I'm like, well, everyone can talk about how big
That's crazy,
Rebellion is,
yeah.
but if I can't afford that fighter, it's like I'm so far away from where I want to be. And it's hard. There's a lot of little things I think we got to get right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too. Like you were saying before with the guys like JPS and Quest. They have been behind the sport for so long, and because they have that pure love for it, and that's awesome. But that's the thing, is trying to find what more can we be offering as an industry to help get that support in.
100%. And that's the other thing. Like a lot of fighters, and I saw a couple of people commenting on somebody else's thing, going fighters shouldn't have to sell tickets, and it's like, Floyd Mayweather sells tickets.
Look what they do in the UFC. They've got massive media they have to do.
Everyone has to do it. Like, if our sport isn't a general interest enough thing, and if you can't get 10 of your mates to come and watch you fight, then like think about how the promoter's got to do that.
That's
like
it.
if you can't get the people closest to you to care about your fight, how's the promoter going to get the general public to do it? And like we do a lot of promo, we do profile videos, we do all this stuff, and we'll go, oh, I shouldn't have to sell tickets, but can you bring this guy out from, and they don't understand the cost of bringing an opponent out. Like my shows are usually half and half Victoria and Interstate. It's like, you guys no idea how much
That's
flights
right.
and accommodation and food and all that stuff
And title
costs.
belts and sanctioning fees, and
Everything,
people don't see the behind the scenes kind of costs for that.
Yeah.
And that's like a few times I've had to explain that to fighters when matching a fight. Is like, well, no, that's not going to work. It's going to cost this much for you to get like a $3,000 to get an opponent in for you for a title fight. But you're not even going to sell one table? Like, how does that, they've got to find that balance that, it's you guys are a business.
Yeah.
The fighters also, if they want to be paid well and have that support there and be put onto more shows, they've also got to pull their weight too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I say too, is, UFC, it's a whole week or something I think the athletes have to put into doing media, and that's in the middle of their fight camp. So
why do people think Conor McGregor acts the way he does? Why do they think Muhammad Ali did the things he did? Because they had a stake in the pay-per-view, whereas a person just showing up and expecting a fixed fight purse and fighting, I'm not dismissing how hard fighting is. I'm just saying there's more to it.
Yes.
And the hard thing is, like, fighters need to fight regularly to get their records up and get better. But if you fight 7 times a year in Melbourne, and sometimes they're like, oh, why can't I fight 2 weeks out? It's like, well, A, you can get hurt, and B, at some stage, your friends aren't going to show up every 2 weeks to watch you fight.
I had that exact same problem. I fought, I think every 3 to 4 weeks for 6 months.
Yep.
And then my last fight was my title fight, and not that many people came because they had other stuff to do. They were sick of paying for tickets to come to my fights, and it's really disheartening because you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But, it's
and
the truth,
because like a lot of shows around Australia and stuff won't spend the money to take Victorian guys out. The Victorian guys only get to fight in Victoria, and the Sydney guys fight in Sydney, and the Queensland guys. And that's some of the problems of our industry. It's like, imagine if the guys could get fights all around Australia.
That's it,
and then they'd build a profile. Then pay-per-view gets bigger. It's like, so that guy fighting in Melbourne is fighting on Epic.
Yep.
I'll buy the pay-per-view and watch it.
Yep, that's it. Because, I love what you've been doing with the promos for your show as well. Is that Will and Tommy that's...
So Will does all the photos and he does all the poster design.
Yeah.
Tom Gathergold, who does all the promos, he's just recently come on board full time with me with my gym and the Rebellion. So we're just now, we've started filming some podcasts. We're doing fighter interviews, the profiles. He's like just editing, guys doesn't sleep. Editing all the past fights, getting our YouTube channel bigger. So there's probably 150 fights on there now. We'll get all 500.
Where are the podcasts? Are they released yet?
We've released one that we did with Angie. There's 2 more that we've filmed, but he's a super perfectionist. So things take a little bit, but also I've got random ideas in my head, so I could just chuck on. Do this now. I'm now going to be this guy for this thing.
This now's more important.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So that'll become a little bit more regular because it's just trying to build around the event, have sort of like highlights, instructionals, profiles, fights, and then make it because I really want to give it a solid go for the next few years because I think it's got a lot more potential.
Oh, for sure. I love that idea. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. Where's all that stuff?
YouTube, Rebellion Muay Thai. So pretty much he's just uploaded the 8-man from November. The last 2 shows are on already. We've got a lot of full shows on, all the Roots events. It's on our YouTube channel, so Rebellion Muay Thai on YouTube. Our Facebook page is very active, and then Instagram Rebellion Muay Thai, and then
Yep.
soon we'll have a iTunes and Stitcher account or whatever for
Oh, right.
podcasting. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Because I like talking. Yeah, and then Will does just those ridiculously good photos.
Yeah.
Like,
I love those ones he does with the moving smoke
he's
and
got to
stuff.
stop.
That's so
He's doing
good.
it so much. It
Oh,
got
is
to the
he?
point where I like don't do any more of the smoking ones. But it's like, you know, when we like things being lucky, like Will and Tom are just like complete luck stuff for me that have happened.
Yeah,
that
right.
they've come in because like they really control what it looks like on the outside. And like obviously Paris is amazing at what it does. And then like Benny and Pete from the gym who helped me on the day with the shows and stuff. They're right about those two guys. They're like, we had a guy here the other week who makes documentaries for jiu-jitsu for our event. And I introduced him to Tom, and he said, I showed my the jiu-jitsu promo video to a guy that does promos for the UFC, and he goes, holy shit, that's like really high-end world-class stuff. And I'm like covering Tom's ears, and that's for a pay rise. But yeah, he's the guy's phenomenal. He's just something
That's
way out with that dude. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And what's coming up next for Rebellion?
So the plan was to do August 18, Rebellion and Roots. So we did the 2 shows, and then November 17. But there's rumors there's a really big event happening in Melbourne in November on the same day as me. So
Yeah,
I'm
right.
staying away from that. And I'm kind of done a lot of events. I've done 4 fight shows in the last 8 weeks. So I'm kind of a bit dried out. So August, we're going to do a really big one. So Toby and Jakub Benko rematch. And then we've got like Samapet Fairtex and Jordan Gottfriedson, and then Compet like Fairtex, who was like the Raja and WBC champion, with David Pennempede,
Yep.
River Daz, and Andy Junico.
Yeah, cool.
Then
What a good
his-
card. That's
yeah,
awesome.
this is the card.
Yeah.
I say it every time.
I was going to say that, not that I've ever not said that
No,
about one of your
thank you.
shows, but
yeah. So
yeah,
this
they're
will
wicked
be
fights.
this will be a big one, and then Roots will be really stacked, and then off till March, and then I'm working on this like one American fighter I've wanted on for a long time. So hopefully, if it stars align, we'll get him back in March and then ready to go. And
Yeah.
so.
Tell us a little bit about Roots. What's the progression with that, and how do people who do you look for on those shows?
So we had Rebellion. So this will be Rebellion 20, and then I don't know if you remember, you fought on a Road to Rebellion.
Yep.
We did 6 of those, and Road to Rebellion was meant to be like a development show, because after Rebellion 2, we went completely full Thai.
Yep.
So no novice and stuff could fight, and then it just grew. So we did Road to Rebellion, which was meant to bring in the newer guys, and I've got very little discipline. So by like Rebellion 5, Toby and Channon Choi was the main, and Sandbach and Jamie Stamp was the
yep.
semi, and then the next one Sandbach. So that whole idea went out the door. So it was like, this is just Rebellion.
Yeah.
So then we did Roots, which is it's a novice show. So they're still professionals. Most of it's still full time, but they're just guys between sort of like 1 and 5 fights.
Yep.
And then the main event's usually a bigger fight. And like, I love reggae, so I've called it Roots because of the reggae thing. And
I was going to say there's Bob Marley, isn't that?
yeah, and every one of them is a different Bob Marley
Yeah.
song. So like the last show was One Love. So these guys are fighting Muay Thai. It says One Love on the back. So like,
Cute.
and people still don't know why. We've got a DJ that plays and they wear the Rasta shorts. But it's really good because there's like our gym, we don't have high caliber guys, so we haven't been on a Rebellion for, I don't know, 15 shows.
Yeah,
but
right.
we've started to be able to get guys on Roots.
Which is that's different to most promoters that have a gym that
Yeah,
usually a lot
I
of their
think it's
guys,
a strength.
yeah.
The biggest strength too is I'm not trying to make anyone famous. I just
Yep.
want fights.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Roots is, then there's a lot of new gyms in Melbourne, so it's getting a chance to start building a relationship with them.
Right.
Their fighters come, and then the people who come to watch them, their tickets get them entry into the nighttime show. So if they come and see their mate, then they'll come at nighttime and see the good guys. So it's the plan is to make eventually like the amateurs that will have a little bit in Victoria, Roots and Rebellion, like a real pathway thing, I guess, to the highest level, and then introduce people, then get them to see what the sport is, their fans to get what the sport is, and also like there's trainers who don't know the scoring, they don't know all that
Yes.
stuff, so it'll get used to it.
Yeah, and some, I guess, if they're new to the sport too, don't know the process of weighing as well.
Everything that goes around being a show, registering for blood work, doing all that stuff. I think it's just a good development of fighters, developing officials, fans, everything. So that's the plan. It's a bit stressful doing 2 shows in one day. Like sometimes we have 28, 30 pro fights in one day, but you know, then you just do it.
Head down and do it.
Yeah, and then you forget about it a week later.
Yeah, and like, let's plan the next one. It's like people that have 20 kids.
Yeah.
Did you not really remember what happened last time?
Yeah, you forget the pain.
Yeah.
I always used to say to Carl Draper, I was like, I wish there was something that recorded emotions.
Yeah.
So you could go, oh, you're going to do a show. This is how you felt 5 days before the show. It's like, I'm never doing this again. It's never happening.
The same with drinking.
Yeah.
Hangover, I'm never drinking again.
Yeah, I stopped. It's been 18 months. So
Really?
Yeah.
I went 3 years once. That was when I was fighting heaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. It's bad that when you say I've stopped drinking, people think you're an alcoholic. It's like, I wasn't an alcoholic. I just stopped drinking.
Yeah, that's it.
Drink a litre of coffee a day.
Yeah, replace it with something
else.
Is there anything you want to let other promoters know, that stuff that you've learnt along the way, that if someone's thinking about putting on a show, something advice you would want to give a new promoter? Because you're Mr. Muay Thai.
It's funny. I like on some things you still get different bits of advice from different people, which is good because I get advice from people and they do it. I mean, I don't know. I think if anyone's coming, there's a song. I like Spanish hip hop as well. There's a song. It's like everybody wants to be a gangster until some do gangster shit. And it's like everyone wants to be a promoter until it's to do the promoter stuff. If you're gonna do it, just be prepared for hell. Because anyone that says it's easy, like it's rewarding as hell, but it's just be prepared. You gotta, back yourself and walk through the fire, because it does. Just some of the stuff that happens to you, like main events, missing medicals and stuff. Like, what do you do? But I think if you're gonna do it. Like I did Rebellion because there was a gap here. There was no other straight out Muay Thai shows at the time that were just Muay Thai. If you're in a state where there's already 70 Muay Thai shows, like. You can, but unless you're going to do something outstanding, I don't think you need to add to it. But if you're going to do something, make sure you have a niche and you actually love what you're doing. It's not a quick money earner thing that you're just going to do and walk away with a pile of cash on your back.
That's it.
Just do the right thing by the sport, because
Yeah, and I guess trailing on from that. So what else in the industry outside of promoting are you doing with Muay Thai, and what sort of change would you like to see in the industry?
I'm sort of involved with Muay Thai Australia, so I'm the WMC MTA rep president here at the moment, so we're trying to get that going a little bit. I guess it's sort of education and like the look of the sport, getting some of the stuff that's happened over the last few years with Jordan Coe passing away. I was ready to stop being involved with the sport. Like I landed in Thailand, got off the plane, turned my phone on, and I just read the news, and I was like about to jump back on and come back. But that sort of stuff is like things that I'd like to see improve. The weight cutting stuff, and just I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge about fighter health and safety, and I think people always go back. But in Thailand, they fight. It's like I love the way the Thais fight Muay Thai, but we don't necessarily have to have guys back up fights every 4 or 5 days. Those things don't necessarily mean they're right. So I'd like that side of that knowledge base and professionalism of the sport to get better, and just understanding it more. And there's stuff that annoys me about scoring that people always talk about, which I just find annoying, that I'd like to change more. But that side of it, the sort of education, understanding the rules, and I'm still learning a lot about the rules, but just some misconceptions I'd like to get cleared up.
And with what's your, ideally in your head, where would you love to see the way we deal with weigh-ins and weight cuts?
It's super hard. I've spoken to the board here a few times. I've spoken to doctors. I think you can do like hydration testing, you can do DEXA scans, you can do stat dex. But at the end of the day, people will always try to game those things. I think education to the trainers and the fighters is a massive part of it. And until you get people to buy into it, you can put rules in place. But people they're always gonna like, they wanted to do 2 week out testing and 1 day out testing, and I was against it, because it's like, all you're gonna do is you're gonna have guys dehydrating twice instead of once. So I think the education part of it and getting people to understand and being not blowing out. I think this fight camp mentality thing where people have a fight, put on 20 kilos, and then it's like, I got to cut the weight and stuff. It's like, you're not being a real athlete, and you're not in the UFC where you fight twice a year and you're doing that. That's the stuff I'd like to get changed, but it's got to be the culture of the sport.
I was just about to say that it was a big culture shift, because one thing I see is kids, they think being a fighter means you have to wear a sweatsuit and you have to cut weight.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess, some fighters think it's cool to do that when it absolutely isn't. I mean, obviously I've done it before in the past,
Yeah.
but, when you get a bit older and you realise, well, it's really unhealthy, and seeing what's happened in the industry as well with deaths and that kind of thing happening, it's such a culture change. But it's how do you change that culture that's been happening for such a long time? It's going to take a while.
It comes from the top, and I was involved with Olympic wrestling for a lot of years, and I didn't cut a lot of weight, but it was this thing where if you weren't dying to cut weight, I'm walking around looking like death, and it's got a real culture of suffering wrestling.
Yep.
I think back to some of the stuff that happened in that, and I'm like, God, I wish I wasn't part of that, helping guys cut weight. But with Muay Thai and stuff, there's guys who people look up to, and there's friends of mine. Some of the stuff they say, I've had private conversations. I'm like, there's so many people that look up to you, and what you're just saying is no, I just got to harden up and stuff.
Yeah.
Fighting injured, fighting concussed, training concussed, doing this, doing that. That's not being tough. That's just dumb.
Yeah.
And you lose one person, it just affects the whole community.
That's it. Yeah, for sure. I've actually heard something interesting the other day that they were talking about the doctors and when they do their residency and all that sort of thing, and that apparently one guy who went and did his whole residency, I guess, and fit in all these hours, and he was known for having done this, and so I think he was like a big wig. I should get my story probably a bit better than this. Anyway, the point of the story is so what happened was he got this sort of fame or infamy for having fit in all these hours, so he was forcing all these guys to try and match his hours, but what no one realised, he actually had a massive coke habit. And so he was just staying awake the whole time. So now that standard is now set into their industry as well. And so doctors, they find they end up back in emergency because they're crashing as soon as they've left the hospital, and stuff like that. And it's even in an industry of health where people are working on you surgically, they've got that same kind of issue in there because it's been happening for so long.
Well, it's like Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vee guy, he was saying the story of when Steve Jobs was about to die and all this stuff came out about him. It came out about what a dictator he was when he running his business, and he said, I just saw all these guys who were entrepreneurs who I'd known forever, who were absolute sweethearts, decide they had to be real assholes to their employees and be erratic because that's what Steve Jobs did. And it's just like, what? That's not you.
That's it.
So the subculture stuff that people try to belong into, it's like, just enjoy the sport. You don't have to do everything else and change your name and
or sort of take on that persona of Conor McGregor and
the Wayne. Something we had one Wayne where a guy tried to do the whole thing at the Wayne, and I was just like, what the hell just happened? Get out! Yeah, it was we all actually started laughing, which was even worse. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, obviously, if that is you, then that's what you're going to do. But not if you know that there's a really lovely person that all of a sudden they're trying to staunch you out.
I know, it's hilarious. What are you doing, bro?
Funny. Is there anything else that you want to, I guess, let people know about your shows or anything, your thoughts on the industry?
No, look, I just, just show up to support your local fight show.
Yeah.
Show up, watch the fights. And, obviously for me, as far as my show goes, get on, watch our fights. All the positive message and stuff we get, I'm really spoiled. I get a lot of get a lot of good love towards it, which is really nice. And, like I said before, sort of respect the sport. I think one thing I always say is if you go to a judo tournament or a karate tournament, whatever, and there's a karate instructor from Japan or judo instructor who's a 5th dan or a 6th dan, their opinion and knowledge of the sport and the way it should be judged and scored gets really cherished. But I don't know, there's this weird thing with Thai people where you can have a Thai trainer who's had 200 fights and stuff, but their opinion sometimes gets dismissed of, this is in Thailand or this is how we do it here. And it's just I find that side of it. I think if anything, we should kind of give them a little bit more respect. But just because you're Thai doesn't mean you also know Muay Thai either. So I'm not saying that, but I think that's my main thing is it is the sport comes and the gambling aside, the sport is fought a certain way for a good reason, and don't just dismiss it. They've had a lot of boxing world champions. There's a reason they don't fight like that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And so the last thing I was going to say to you, so if anyone was interested in to get onto Rebellion, what's the best way for them to go about like you were saying before, would you prefer someone put together like a highlight video, that kind
No,
of thing?
I like to think I follow the scene pretty well. But I think, your trainer's the best person to get in contact.
Oh, for sure,
I
yeah.
get fighters contacting and it's really nice, but at the end of the day, it's your trainer's choice. Get your trainer to get in touch and, just be reliable. Don't make a reputation of pulling out of fights because it gets around. All promoters talk. And if you got a
Yes.
reputation of pulling out of fights and doing that, you won't get on Rebellion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So don't find Si, he'll find you.
Yeah.
Not in a creepy way.
No. But yeah, if you want to fight on routes, we don't do a lot of fly-ins for routes. But generally, if guys, like we've had a lot of guys come from WA and Queensland and Sydney that kind of make their own way down, and we match them. And if they fight full tie, they still get a purse. So if you want to be on routes, that's a good way of getting on Rebellion. Come
Yep.
down and fight on that. And if you do well, we definitely move you up. Like
Yeah.
there's been a few people that have gone from routes to Rebellion.
Yeah, awesome. There
Yeah.
you go. That's a good little pathway for you fighters out there. So
Yeah,
cool.
and so most states there's trainers that I've worked with, a whole lot of promoters, like in Sydney with Andrew Parnham and Lewis Regis and Aram and stuff. So like those guys, if you're on their shows, I'd definitely keep an eye out. Obviously Queensland, if like Richie or Soren or anyone ever hits me up about a fighter, I take their word pretty seriously. And same with WA, or even in South Australia, if like Ethan or even Pinky or those guys go, keep an eye on this guy. So if you're fighting on a lot of those shows, and there's good guys in the scene who everyone trusts and they speak highly of you, they know a lot more about Muay Thai than I do, so I listen to them.
That's it, yeah. So no matter what state you're in, just perform awesome all
Yeah,
the time.
just
People are
fight
watching.
Fight Muay Thai really well. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for having a chat.
Thank
It's
you
good to
very
catch up
much.
with you.
Thanks for coming down.
No worries.
Cheers.